we're doing a deep dive into something pretty complex, but really important if you're tracking crypto and finance. We're looking at the roadmap for the Metallicus Stack. It's basically trying to answer that huge question. How do you get blockchain tech that banks will actually use and regulators won't block? So our mission today is to kind of unpack how this US-built network aims to connect banks, credit unions, fintech, even DeFi folks.
Yeah, and what struck me looking at the source material is this isn't your standard crypto white paper. It reads more like a blueprint for financial compliance delivered via blockchain. The whole thing is structured in layers. This stack, where being regulatory friendly and plugging into the US payment system isn't an afterthought. It's like built into the architecture itself.
Right, it's baked in from the start.
Exactly. Forget the idea of an open Wild West highway. This is much more like air traffic control, highly controlled. Every transaction needs a pre-approved flight plan, that sort of thing.
Okay, I like that analogy. Air traffic control implies precision, safety. So looking at the stack diagram and the sources, it's definitely architectural. Where do we start? The foundation.
Yeah, let's start at the bottom. Layer 0, that's the metal blockchain.
Metal blockchain, okay.
Think of it as the absolute bedrock. Its main job is to support these things called subnets.
Subnets, like mini blockchains.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Customizable, isolated blockchain environments. So Bank A can have its own subnet, Credit Union B gets its own. They can set some of their own rules, governance, all within their private space. But it's still connected to the wider system. And crucially, it's designed to be scalable, secure, and, regulatory ready right out of the box.
Got it. So Layer 0 gives institutions their own compliant sandbox, essentially. Privacy, customization. But you mentioned connection. If everyone's in their own little sandbox, where does the action happen? Like the actual moving of money fast?
Okay, yeah. That's where Layer 1 comes in. That's the XPR network. Sometimes they call it the A-chain.
A-chain, okay.
It sits right on top of the metal blockchain, Layer 0, and its primary role is settlement. It's the central hub where all the different stablecoins and assets from all those subnets actually get settled.
So that's the fast lane.
Exactly. It's the busy intersection, where DeFi meets payments, meets APIs, but it's built for speed.
And the sources really hammer this point home. High throughput, instant settlements, but they also talk about something pretty unusual, zero gas transfers.
Right. Zero gas. That's a big one for Layer 1.
How does that even work? Usually someone has to pay for the transaction processing, the gas fees?
Well, yeah, and that zero gas thing is where you see the engineering trade-offs.
Yeah.
For high volume payments, you need efficiency, you need it to be cheap or free for the user. But you're right, the computation cost for the network validators, it has to be covered somewhere.
So where is it covered?
The thinking seems to be, based on the sources, that the complexity and the cost are kind of bundled into that Layer 0 structure, into the subnets themselves. The institutions running the subnets might handle those costs internally, perhaps as an operational expense, rather than charging per transaction on Layer 1.
Okay. So they sort of absorb the cost at the foundational level.
Seems like it. It effectively privatizes the fee management within the institution's own subnet. That lets Layer 1, the settlement layer, stay super fast and frictionless for the actual users and institutions making payments.
That's clever. Keeps the user experience smooth.
Yeah, it creates this clear separation, right? L0 handles the underlying complexity, the governance, maybe the core costs. L1 is all about universal speed and finalizing the settlements instantly.
Okay, so L0 for the private spaces, L1 for the speed. But if you've got Bank A stablecoin and Credit Union B stablecoin, how do they actually, talk to each other? How do they become interchangeable?
Good question. That brings us to the middle layers, which are arguably the most critical for making this whole thing work as a system. It's about unifying the currency and, crucially, those compliance rails.
Right. You can't just have dozens of different bank tokens floating around without some standard.
Exactly. So you've got all these different institutional stablecoins issued on various subnets. They need to become liquid and standardized. The mechanism for this is what the sources call the stablecoin index.
Stablecoin index, like an average?
Sort of. Think of it as a funnel. All those different institutional stablecoins, CU tokens, bank tokens, whatever, they all flow into this central unit of account.
And that central unit is the metal dollar. XMD.
Precisely,
Yeah.
XMD, the metal dollar. But it's important to understand what it is. It's not really a brand new stablecoin issued from scratch.
It's more like a composite, a standard they all convert to.
You got it. It acts as the composite settlement stablecoin. It's the single unified unit of account for the entire ecosystem. So no matter if a payment starts as Bank A coin or CUB token, It gets settled universally via this metal dollar hub.
That makes sense. That's essential for liquidity, for making payments between different institutions seamless.
Absolutely vital. Otherwise, you just have isolated islands again. The XMD hub creates that common settlement ground.
Okay, so we have the unified settlement currency. Now let's talk compliance. The sources use this really strong visual, these blue pipes. What on earth are the blue pipes?
Yeah, the blue pipes. It's a great visual. They're shown running vertically through the entire stack diagram.
Right, connecting everything.
They represent the mandatory compliance and liquidity rails. Mandatory is the key word there. Meaning every single institutional stablecoin, doesn't matter which subnet it came from, must travel through these blue pipes to get to that central metal dollar settlement hub. There's no way around it.
So it's not just a pathway, it's an enforcement layer.
Exactly. It enforces compliance. This is where the system ensures regulatory rules are followed automatically.
Like KYC and AML.
Yeah.
Know your customer, anti-money laundering.
Yes. Those critical functions are baked into these rails. When a stablecoin transaction flows through the blue pipes, it's programmatically checked against those compliance standards. It's kind of like they've automated the role of a chief compliance officer directly into the architecture.
Wow, so compliance isn't a separate step you do later. It's part of the transaction flow itself.
That's the big idea. Engineering out the need for trust between institutions by automating the regulatory checks at the routing level. For regulated industries, banks, credit unions, that's huge. That offers a level of assurance they just don't get from, say, public DeFi protocols.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Foundation, speed, unified currency, enforced compliance. Now, what about the top layers? The tools that developers actually use to interact with all this?
Right, the upper layers are crucial for adoption. You need the user interfaces, the developer tools.
And identity seems really key here, especially for banks.
Absolutely non-negotiable for them. Traditional DeFi often works with pseudonyms, anonymous wallets. That's a non-starter for regulated finance. So the stack includes specific tools, metal identity, and WebAuth. These aren't just logins, they're about secure authentication and, critically, linking actions on the network back to a verifiable, real-world compliant identity.
So you know who is doing what? That's the bridge traditional finance needs.
Definitely. Then for users, there's Metal Pay, which is positioned as the user-friendly payment interface.
Okay. And what about more complex financial activities? Trading, liquidity.
That's where MetalX comes in. It provides decentralized trading and liquidity pools, but operating within this regulated, identity-verified framework. So DeFi tools, but with guardrails.
Bringing DeFi capabilities into the compliance zone.
Pretty much. And then there's the developer angle. How do you get people building on this thing?
Yeah, how do developers access this? Yeah. They need to learn a whole new system.
Yeah, that's where the Metal L2 layer is important. It's designed to extend programmability, make it easy to build applications. And the key feature here is EVM compatibility.
EVM. Ethereum virtual machine. That's huge, right?
It's massive. It means the vast majority of existing blockchain developers, the tools they use, the smart contracts already written for Ethereum and other EVM chains, they can basically be ported over and run on this Metallicus stack within its compliant environment.
So you don't have to start from scratch. You leverage the biggest existing ecosystem.
Exactly. It dramatically lowers the barrier for developers to start building regulated financial applications. They can use familiar tools in a new compliant sandbox.
And finally, how do the big players, the actual banks and established fintechs, plug into all this without needing, a massive IT project?
APIs. Application programming interfaces. The sources describe these as the direct rails. They offer a more straightforward way for existing financial institutions to hook their systems into the stack's capabilities, settlement, custody, identity, without having to become blockchain experts overnight. Got it.
APIs provide that simpler connection point. Okay, let's pull back a bit. We've gone through the layers, the tech. What's the big picture? What's for you, the listener, trying to understand where compliant crypto is heading?
Well, if you synthesize the source material, it's really about tackling specific pain points for regulated finance using blockchain, but prioritizing compliance above all else. So for banks and credit unions, the big win is those layer 0 subnets. They get their own private, compliant blockchain space that's explicitly designed to work within the U.S. regulatory and payment system context. That potentially reduces a lot of regulatory ambiguity for them.
And the operational benefit seems clear too, right? That real-time settlement via the XMD hub, moving money instantly between institutions instead of waiting T+2 days like the old system, has a direct saving in time and money.
Huge efficiency gain, absolutely. And then for the developers, maybe the most exciting part, they get this toolbox, DeFi capabilities. secure ways to handle custody, verifiable identity, all integrated. It gives them the components they need to build next-generation financial apps that institutions might actually adopt because the compliance is built in. They don't have to choose between innovation and regulation.
And that brings us back to the core message hammered home in the sources. Made in the USA, built for compliance, targeting those regulated industries that have frankly been pretty wary of decentralized tech until now.
Yeah, it's really an attempt to reconcile the speed and programmability that blockchain offers with the rigid KYC, AML, and governance rules that U.S. regulators demand. That whole stack we walk through.
Yeah.
The customizable subnets at L0, providing privacy and control, the sheer speed of settlement on XPR at L1, all unified by the metal dollar, XMD, and forced through those compliant blue pipe rails.
Yeah.
That's the essence of the system.
Okay, the source material ends with a simple, almost ominous line. This is just the beginning.
Right.
Which sets up our final thought for you to chew on. If Metal blockchain really delivers on this promise, giving every bank, every credit union their own customizable, compliant subnet, their own private piece of this ecosystem, what becomes the priority for you if you were running one of those institutions? Would you focus all your energy on customizing that subnet to perfectly match your specific, maybe decades-old internal systems, make it super bespoke?
Or would you prioritize maximizing the shared standards? Focus on interoperability with everyone else in the ecosystem, even if it means adapting your internal processes a bit more.
Exactly. It's that classic tension, isn't it? Customization versus standardization.
It really is. Because the more an institution optimizes purely for its own internal needs, the more it might kind of drift away from the shared standards that make being part of the ecosystem valuable in the first place. How they navigate that trade-off, that balance between institutional privacy and network integration, that could really determine how successful and how big this Metallicus Stack ultimately becomes.
A fascinating dynamic to watch unfold. That brings us to the end of this deep dive. We hope that gives you a much clearer picture of the Metallicus Stack and its ambitions. Thanks for joining us.